So guys, in this video, I'm going to break down how to realistically get a top 1% physique. That statement alone seems like hyperbole, but it's really not. The bar isn't as high as you probably think it is. And with a few habits and consistency, I think it's achievable for most guys. I'll be breaking down what a top 1% physique is and what you need to do to get there. I know what you're probably thinking, and a common reaction to what I've just said is to blame genetics, which immediately puts it outside your control. And really, it's a sneaky tactic your brain uses to avoid taking accountability and responsibility for your own results and physique development. Why even bother, Bodybuilding's a game of genetics. So the first step has got to be stop using genetics as an excuse. There's an undeniable genetic factor to pro bodybuilding for sure. And a lot of the guys you see on the Arnold Classic stage and the Olympia stage, they're in the top 0.01% genetically. And even if you and me were to eat what they eat, train how they train, and follow the exact same drug protocol, we still wouldn't look like them. But I think most guys can be in the top 1% if they put the work in. I'll talk about what the work is later, but first I'll break down why a top 1% physique is easier to attain than you think it is. So for this example, we're going to use 1,000 guys, roughly your age, plus or minus 5 years. Let's say that's your competition. And they're going to be picked at random off the street. Top 1% would mean better than 990 of them. So 10 out of 1,000 would be top 1%. That sounds absolutely crazy, but here in the UK, 85% of the population don't even have a gym membership. I haven't looked up the stats, but I would imagine that statistic is representative of most Western countries. So out of those 1,000 guys we started with, we can immediately weed out 850 of them. They're likely going to be out of shape, skinny fat, no considerable amount of muscle mass. The average body fat for a man in the UK is 20%, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's called average for a reason. It's the majority. And if you're someone watching this channel, we don't want to be average, and we can do a lot better than that. So out of the 150 remaining, how many of those that do have a gym membership train seriously and consistently? You might have 50 of those that, they show up to train a couple of days a week, go through the motions, and sometimes they'll just randomly disappear and take months or weeks off the gym entirely. There's a mate of mine that always complains about not being in shape. And he goes through periods where he hits the gym really, really hard for a month, then takes a couple of weeks off, and then hits it really hard again for a couple of weeks, then takes like a month off. And he just ends up beating himself up and repeats the whole cycle again, basically from ground zero. I'm telling him, like, dude, just be fucking consistent and you'll see results, but he can't do it. And I know another guy that just seems to be perpetually dieting, but always looks the same. Like, what are you eating, bro? And it's exactly the same story of inconsistency. They may be able to stick to a calorie deficit for a few days, a week, a couple of weeks, but he'll go out on a weekend with his mates, drink 1,000 calories in alcohol, followed by a 3 a.m. pizza, just normie shit. And that's basically all the work he's put in all week, sticking to his diet and his deficit, just gone like that. So anyway, let's say a third don't take it seriously and we're left with 100 that do. So with the 100 left, how many of those are eating right and maintaining a reasonable level of body fat? Let's say under 12%, maybe half. So out of 1,000 guys, we're left with 50, or 1 in 20 that go to the gym consistently, make a decent effort to eat right, and maintain a reasonable level of body fat. And if you can do all that consistently, or are already doing that, you know what, congratulations. You'll get a top 5% physique without even touching a PED. But this video isn't about being top 5%. We're after that elite top 1%. And I think that's where PEDs can be leveraged in conservative doses as the final icing on the cake. So broken down logically like this, you can see that a top 1% physique is way more attainable and achievable than you probably thought it was. And if you like this content, drop the video a like. It does help me out a ton. Thanks guys, back to the video. Now let's look at what it actually takes. Okay, on the training side, are you training 5 days a week with good intensity? Are you pushing yourself every session and actually trying to progressively overload? Or are you lifting what you were lifting 6 months ago? There's lots of ways you can progressively overload too. It doesn't always have to be piling more weight on. You can add reps, you can add sets, or even just slow things down and create more time under tension. All of these are going to be factors of progressive overload. I find the sweet spot for intensity is to feel fatigue and slight soreness in the target muscle the following few days after training. That's a good indication you're doing enough. And as long as you're hitting your protein targets, it's almost guaranteed to translate into muscle gain. I'll just briefly touch on that too. Some guys, they have no issue working out consistently, but they'll struggle on the diet side of things. Probably most commonly, and this was certainly my sticking point for a while, is just under eating protein. You're providing the stimulus you need to grow by going to the gym and training hard. But if you're not providing the raw materials in the form of protein that your body needs to grow, then it's just a waste of time. And for the sake of making this video short and sweet, I'm not going to go into training splits, sets, reps, because that could be a whole other video in of itself, if not a whole series of videos. Personally, my current split is back, shoulders and triceps, legs, chest and biceps, off, and then repeat. And I'll adjust the carbs based on whether I'm trying to bulk or whether I'm trying to cut, and based on what I'm training. And I'll typically do a low carb day on my off days. So it's kind of like a carb cycling type of approach. All right, the food. I mentioned the importance of hitting your protein targets a minute ago. On top of that, though, 90% of your diet should be coming from whole food ingredients. Processed stuff will typically mess up your digestion, and there tends to be more weird things in there, like preservatives that, may or may not give you cancer in 20 years. And to be fair, if you're eating whole foods, you'll find it much easier just to stay lean anyway. Don't know anybody who's got fat eating chicken and rice. In terms of body fat percentage, I mentioned that 20% is average here in the UK. So if you're walking around at 10 or 12%, or even better, single digits with a decent amount of muscle on your frame, you're really going to separate yourself from the masses. A lot of guys that are in the gym consistently have the muscle there. It's just obscured with too much body fat. And now's the perfect time to commit to a cut as well. At the time of recording this video, what are we in? Late March? Summer's around the corner. So I couldn't think of a better time to commit to an 8 to 12 week cutting phase and really get into shape. And come June, you could look radically different. Okay, PEDs then. PEDs will take you from top 5% to top 1% physique-wise if you're doing everything else right. When you're lean enough, they'll give you that photoshopped kind of look that really you can't achieve naturally. There's something I heard years ago, and it's so true. You can pick two, but you can't have all three. You can be big and natural, but you won't be lean. You can be lean and natural, but you won't be big. Or you can be big and lean, but you won't be natural. When it comes to PEDs as well, you don't really need as much as you think. I always try and use the bare minimum for what I'm trying to achieve. And I think in general, that's a really good rule of thumb. Why use more than you need and risk side effects? Just as an example, last year's cut, I ran a little cycle, got into decent shape. What I was on here was 250 milligrams of testosterone just to hold on to the muscle mass, and 250 milligrams of Masteron. That was a week. So 500 milligrams total in a cutting phase is probably the maximum amount you'll need unless you're stepping on stage or something like that, preparing for a contest. You really don't need that much at all. And to be fair, I think even that was overkill. I probably could have got very similar results on 150 of each. I hope this makes sense, guys, and I hope it seems far more achievable and attainable than you probably thought it was. And it really comes down to a few basic habits and consistency. If I could sum it up, it's train hard, eat right, be consistent. And if you want to use PEDs or not on top of that, that's your choice. And if you can do that, I'm 100% sure you can achieve a top 1% physique if you commit to it and put your mind to it. With that being said, thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe for more of this content. Check out my blog, enhancedplayer.com. If you need my help getting into top shape, I do offer coaching. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Aside from that, see you next time.